Hey guys, Rebel Engine 95, recording live from your local county prison cell, and yeah, it's not often I do one of these on a weekday, at least not recorded on a weekday. Sometimes I've been known to do that and forget to upload it until the weekend, but yeah, this is one that is, I've sort of, I don't want to admit this like I'm stopping or anything, but I've sort of, I've sort of lost the urge to do this as often as I've been. Maybe it's just things being busy. I'm not sure. But what I did get this one, which I think is pretty cool. This is Jaws, the shark from the movie, versus the creature from the Black Lagoon. First thing I want to say is I like this so much more than Jaws versus Echo. That was, like, I think I might have even said at the time, like, what you're not going to find another Jaws matchup, right? You definitely might not find another Echo matchup, but I was like, you're probably not going to find another Jaws matchup. Well, here's the other Jaws matchup, and it's way better. Because these two are, without getting too symbolic with it, they are kind of like the reason you don't go in the water, right? They are horror. Well, Jaws isn't really a horror movie, but it's horror adjacent, right? But they're kind of like the they both innovated in their own way the horror, the underwater horror, monster, both from being in the deep and all that. The other cool connection, and this is, I'm explaining this in the beginning so I can explain the title. The other connection is that both of these characters have semi-canonical names that are not the names that people call them. The creature from the Black Lagoon technically being called Gillman, and the shark from Jaws, well, from the original Jaws, his fandom accepted name is Bruce, because that's the name that the crew gave the animatronic shark, if it was even animatronic at that point. But okay, and the all the subsequent sharks have been relatives of the original. The shark not in the movie, and in any of the movies, and also in the novel, none of the sharks received a name. Actually, I believe there's one that they named Vengeance, but point is, yeah. Also, Jaws had a novel. I don't know that. But yeah, point is, yeah, these are like the two. These are cut from the same cloth, funny enough, and you wouldn't expect it. This wouldn't be a fight that you would think. However, we'll look at the creature, and that's why I'm going to be calling them Jaws and the creature, and not, I'm not going to be calling them Bruce and Gillman. Sounds like a it sounds like an alternative rock band or something. We'll be going over the creature first. So the creature is a species of creature that has presumably existed for several millions of years. Whether it itself has been alive several millions of years, or it is just from a species that was around several millions of years ago and had recently died out, is up to interpretation. However, we do know that it is presumably the last of its kind, and ends up looking for human mates and also using humans as food sources. while in the rivers of the Amazon. Now the creature itself, it's proposed that it's stronger underwater than it is on land, and it gets weaker the more time it spends on land. Though it is capable of surviving, and eventually if it would spend X amount of time on land, then it would die. But even while on land, it's able to pretty effortlessly crush a human skull with one hand, or webbed hand. And it's also been shown, like, on land flipping over cars and whatnot in the sequels. I also didn't know there were Creature of Black Lagoon sequels. Now it does have, kind of this armored scaling over, a humanoid body. It's funny, I believe they go into the science behind it and they say its blood is like a percentage of, it's like 30-something% white something, and doesn't have a nucleus, so it is literally like a halfway point between fish and man. And so it is incredibly durable with this armored scaling. In fact, it's actually immune to both bulletproof. It's both bulletproof and immune to being like set on fire. One of the more effective ways of incapacitating it, at least, has been poison. I think originally they just used a regular fish poison that they assumed killed it, and then it ended up being that it was still alive, and they used an industrial strength one, and that only ended up incapacitating it instead of killing it. They used one that could kill an elephant. But yeah, and also shockingly enough, and this kind of falls in line with its ability to have possibly been alive several million years, is that it seems to have some sort of like evolutionary adaptation, ability to adapt to things very quickly, because not only do the poisons building up a tolerance to that make sense for that, but also in the third movie, it had been on land so many times that it had eventually adapted to breathing on land. It could already breathe on land, but it had adapted to only being able to breathe on land and lost the ability to breathe underwater, which is why they presume at the end of the third movie, they never get confirmation because it escapes into the ocean. They say, well, he had already adapted to breathing on land, so he's probably going to suffocate and drown. Which could mean that if the creature were to be harmed by something a number of times, that it would basically develop a resistance to that pretty almost immediate, like amazingly quick considering the typical span of evolution. I think it's also been proposed that it might have like a regenerative healing ability. It could be proposed that but there's unfortunately not a lot of. The Creature of the Black Lagoon is one of those creatures that is one of the universal horror monsters that doesn't have, like, it has a mythology that it's inspired by, being like the water people of the Amazon, but it doesn't have like a direct lore. Like Frankenstein had a novel, had a series of novels before it. Dracula had a series of novels before it. The Mummy was taken pretty directly from mythology, so you could use an entire Egyptian mythology behind it. But the creature is an original property that has inspiration behind it, and not much has been added to the lore since the first three films. So it's a little hard to say, like, definitively what any of its actual abilities are, especially because being a horror movie monster, we don't see it, in confrontation too much. We see it come up to do something, and then, they try to stop it, and then it goes away. It's sudden appearances. But yeah, that's the creature from the Black Lagoon. Now on to Jaws. I know it's probably going to be reverse of this, that the thumbnail will have Jaws first, probably just because it's more popular. But, yeah, again, calling it Jaws, not Bruce. Plus, Bruce is also the name of the shark from Finding Nemo, so that would be confusing. But, yeah, Jaws. So, Jaws is a great white shark, right? That's not mince words. It's not a megalodon. It's not a mute. It is a great white shark. But it is an exceptionally large great white shark. But not comically oversized. See, canonically, Jaws is 25 feet long. And weighs about, in the movie, they estimate he weighs about 3 tons. In reality, a great white of that size would weigh closer to 5. But it's not comically oversized, because female great white sharks actually live, have been known to be over 20 feet long, whereas males are usually cap out at around 18. So, however, I don't know if there are any females that have hit 20, that we know of, that have hit 25. I think maybe one of the biggest female great whites they've seen is, I think, maybe they're 23 feet long. So Jaws isn't, like, ridiculously oversized, but he is very, great whites are already gigantic. So, to add an extra 7 feet onto one is a little... Was it feet or was it meters? I hope it wasn't meters, otherwise that's terrifying. 25 meters long. Oh my god, that's horrifying. That's a plane. But yeah, so... And unlike other great whites, because Jaws is so massive and so strong, it's been shown, devouring humans, pretty much, like biting them in half, pretty much. It's been shown hunting and killing orcas in some of the games, which, if you don't know anything about orcas are basically, they're like the ultimate ops for great whites. Specifically, they hunt and kill great whites, and because they're basically great whites but better, Jaws is one step on top of them. So yeah, it could also be, it's been proposed a lot of times, there's a lot of proposition in this, because again, calling Jaws a character is a little generous, even so. To like really analyze a character is kind of hard. But the great whites typically have an age of somewhere around like 75 years, and they technically never stop growing. So it could be that Jaws is, hundreds of years, is over 100 years old, and that's why it's just so long lived. That's why it grew that large. There have been other possibilities that it's just like it's not like a mutant per se, but it's just like a genetic mishap, just like how some people are just born gigantic as humans. It could just be a right combination of genes and circumstances. It's also been, a lot of things have been proposed in that regard. There are also other sharks, like I said. There's, Brusette, which is the unofficial name of the wife, or not the wife, but the mate of Jaws that came back for revenge. And then there's Vengeance, who was the son of Jaws and Brusette, who also had his own book and film. In the book, I believe it was a curse that they put on the family of the people who keep stopping Jaws. In the film, I think again it's like a vengeance situation where it's like I'm gonna, this shark is hunting the family down. Why this family would continue to live near the beach, I don't understand. But yeah, so that doesn't really add much to the conversation aside from now there's magic involved in Jaws. One different change between the novel and the book, because believe it or because the insane things that Jaws have done, like punching holes in ships and sinking them and everything, which is not so disaccurate from great whites. Great whites have been known to like dent ships by running into them, but being able to, and I think there might even be instances where they've punched holes in them, but not like enough to drown the ship. But one key difference between Jaws in the novel and the movie is how he dies. In the movie, obviously, we know the famous "smile, you son of a bitch." They put a tank of pressurized gas in his mouth and then they shoot it and it blows him up, right? In the book, we just assume he dies from a combination of exhaustion and blood loss from his wounds. Kind of like a Moby Dick situation where, like after the long battle. That's not how Moby Dick dies. I don't know why I said that. But, well, actually, no, that is how Moby Dick dies. Technically, Moby Dick just drags him into the deep with him. But, after this long, storied battle, it just becomes too much. It's not, there's no decisive blow. There's just, the fight over time kills him. Which is much more symbolic, but also a little more pedestrian in terms of his death. You don't need a giant fireball. A great explosion can kill the shark, but you don't need it. You can just wear it down over time. But getting into the fight here, this is difficult to place because, again, while we assume the creature can swim at high speeds, great white shark, normal great white sharks have about a swimming, can swim at I think like over 25 miles an hour. And we've just never seen the creature do that. Even in the movies where now we do see that it can swim in both the rivers of the Amazon and in the ocean, which means it seems to be adaptable to both freshwater and saltwater, which makes this fight a lot easier because it would just take place in the ocean. But we don't, like, if there's any mention that, like, the creature swam from the Amazon into the regular ocean or something, then yeah, we can assume from the distance that he would have to be swimming, right? Then maybe you can give him a speed advantage or something. However, I will say sharks tend to only swim in one direction versus like having full maneuverability like somebody would, if they were able to swim very fast and had like, full limbs, you'd be able to change your direction a lot easier. Yeah, so I mean, Jaws, I think, would get the speed advantage. Probably get the strength advantage. Like I said, the creature can effortlessly crush a human skull and, like, flip over cars and stuff, even in, like, a weakened state. But Jaws, like, is punching holes in, like, ships, and, biting people in half, which I think gives it a lot more lethality. Even if we're scaling Jaws down and scaling the creature up, saying like it would be stronger underwater, and scaling Jaws down for saying like, oh well, the ships, it was punching a hole in like smaller ships and stuff. I think Jaws still pretty definitively takes that as well. As far as like, the durability aspect, the creature is bulletproof and immune to fire and whatnot. Not that it would be immune to like explosions like that would kill Jaws, but Jaws being able to die from just like gradual harpoon wounds, and the creature having survived presumably millions of years rather than Jaws maybe being alive for, you know, over 100. You know, that kind of leans in the durability advantage there, saying that. And if we very much presume, we got to scale the creature up here, guys, come on. If we very much presume that there's like an evolutionary, you know, an adaptation factor to it, you know, maybe if Jaws gets a hold of like an arm or something a couple of times, that arm will start getting like harder plating and it won't be able to, you know, do it anymore. But don't forget, the creature is the first few times that would happen, the creature would be susceptible to it, like it was with the poisons. It had to actually be poisoned and have it work the first time. Yeah, it didn't die from it like intended. It had a better resistance to it than they thought, but to build up like a tolerance to it, it had to get poisoned in the first place. This is really upsetting to me because it's really making the creature of the Black Lagoon look a lot less cool. Because we're not even scaling Jaws to like some giant thing. We're scaling Jaws to a normal shark here. Even if Jaws was a regular great white shark, I don't think the creature could kill it without like a knife or something. I will say the creature does have these like claws that are really sharp. So it is, we don't really see them like, you know, tear anyone up or anything, but it is presumable that like if Jaws can die from blood loss and exhaustion from harpoon wounds, maybe the creature could wear it down over time, especially with its better durability. I mean, being able to withstand a bullet, you would think maybe you'd be able to withstand a shark bite, but again, this is a shark bite that crushes people in half. Especially considering the strength that the creature has, you would think, okay, well maybe, you know, you could really dig into Jaws, since again, it's susceptible to regular harpoons. But that's not discounting the speed advantage that Jaws has. The creature would have to survive long enough to win a war of attrition like that, which it would definitely be suited for, but that's a very big if, and I think most cases a regular great white shark might actually kill the creature, let alone Jaws. But anyway, yeah, I thought this was a cool fight. I'll see when I upload this. I might not be able to do it right away. Anyway, Verbal Engine 95. See ya.